Hi guys, have you ever wondered what the most powerful people in the ancient world ate when they first opened their eyes in the morning? Before we start, likes and subscribes help me keep making these. Where are you listening from? Drop your city and time in the comments. I'm always reading them, thinking, wait, people in New York listen to history stories to sleep. Okay, tonight we're talking about what Romans ate for breakfast. But before we go anywhere, get cozy. Pillows good? Blanket situation handled? Perfect. Trust me on this one. You're standing in a Roman apartment building called an insula, and it's early morning in the year 50 AD. The sun hasn't fully risen yet, but the city of Rome is already making noise. Somewhere below you, a cart rattles over cobblestones. Someone's yelling about fish. The smell of bread drifts up from a bakery 3 streets over, mixing with smoke and the faint sour tang of olive oil that's been sitting in an amphora too long. You're on the 3rd floor, which means you're not rich, but you're not desperate either. Rich people live in houses with atriums and fountains. Desperate people live on the 6th floor, where the ceiling leaks and the stairs creak like they're personally offended by your existence. Your room is small. There's a bed, a wooden chest, a stool, and not much else. The walls are thin enough that you can hear your neighbour coughing, and honestly, you've been hearing that cough for weeks now. You're starting to wonder if he's okay, but Roman social etiquette doesn't really include wellness checks, so you just lie there and listen. The light coming through the window is grey and soft, the kind of light that makes you want to stay in bed forever, but you can't. You have work. Everyone has work. This is Rome, and Rome doesn't care if you're tired. You sit up. Your back hurts a little because Roman mattresses are essentially cloth sacks filled with straw, wool if you're lucky, and the occasional bug. You're wearing a tunic because you slept in it. Everyone sleeps in their tunics. Pyjamas aren't a thing yet. You'll invent those in about 1800 years, but for now, you just wake up already dressed, which is either efficient or depressing depending on how you look at it. You stand up and stretch. Your stomach makes a noise. You're hungry. This is not surprising. You were hungry when you went to bed, and you'll be hungry again in 3 hours. Hunger is just part of the day's rhythm, like the sound of carts or the smell of fish. You walk over to the small table near the window, and this is where breakfast happens. Breakfast in ancient Rome is not a grand affair. There are no eggs Benedict, no avocado toast, no oat milk lattes with an extra shot. Breakfast is whatever you can grab quickly before you leave, because the day is already happening outside, and it's not going to wait for you. You look at the table and see exactly what you expected to see. There's a piece of bread. It's dark, dense, coarse bread made from emmer wheat or barley, and it's not fresh. Fresh bread is expensive, and you're not eating expensive bread at dawn. This bread is from yesterday, maybe the day before. It's hard enough that you're going to have to dunk it in something or just commit to chewing for a while. Next to the bread is a small clay bowl with olive oil in it. The oil is greenish and smells strong, almost grassy, because Romans don't refine their olive oil the way you're used to. It's thick and flavourful and sometimes a little bitter, but it's also everywhere. Olive oil is the butter, the cooking spray, the salad dressing, the moisturiser, the lamp fuel. Romans use olive oil for everything except maybe paving roads, and honestly they probably tried that once. You pick up the bread and dip it into the oil. The bread soaks it up like it's been waiting for this moment its entire existence. You take a bite. It's chewy, slightly salty, and the olive oil coats your mouth in a way that feels heavy, but not unpleasant. This is breakfast. This is what Romans eat in the morning. Bread and oil. Sometimes there's a little cheese if you planned ahead, or some olives if you bought extra at the market. But today it's just bread and oil, because that's what's here, and you're not complaining. Complaining doesn't make more food appear. You chew slowly. Outside, the city is getting louder. You hear a rooster, which is strange because you're in the middle of Rome, but someone on your street definitely owns a rooster, and that rooster has opinions about the sunrise. You hear a door slam. You hear footsteps on the stairs. Someone heading down to start their day. Bakers have been awake for hours already. The public baths won't open until later, but the people who run them are probably already heating the water, feeding the furnace, making sure everything works. Rome is a machine, and every person in it is a small gear, turning at slightly different speeds. You finish the bread and lick the olive oil off your fingers. There's no napkin. You'll wipe your hands on your tunic in a minute, but for now, you just stand there tasting the oil and thinking about nothing in particular. Your mind is still waking up. You're not thinking about politics or philosophy or whether the empire is declining. You're thinking about whether you remembered to fix your sandal strap, and whether the shop you work at will be busy today, and whether you'll have enough money by the end of the week to buy something other than bread and oil. You drink water from a clay cup. The water is lukewarm and tastes faintly of the clay, which is fine. Romans don't expect water to taste like anything. Water is just water. If you were rich, you might drink wine mixed with water, even in the morning, but you're not rich, so it's just water. You drink it all, set the cup down, and look around the room one more time. There's nothing else to do here. Breakfast is over. It lasted maybe 5 minutes. You didn't sit down at a table with your family. You didn't scroll through your phone. You just ate some bread, drank some water, and now you're ready to leave, because that's how mornings work in ancient Rome. Simple, fast, unremarkable. The kind of morning that doesn't make it into history books but happens a million times a day. You walk toward the door, but before you leave, you glance back at the corner of the room where you keep your food supplies, and it's not much to look at. There's an amphora, which is just a big clay jar with handles, and inside that amphora is more olive oil, because you bought it in bulk from a merchant who swore it was the best oil in Rome, and you didn't believe him, but you bought it anyway because the price was reasonable. Next to the amphora is a small sack of grain that you'll take to the miller later this week, or maybe next week, depending on whether you feel like carrying a sack of grain through the streets. Romans don't have kitchens in their apartments, not like you're imagining. There's no stove, no oven, no refrigerator humming in the corner. Cooking happens outside, in communal ovens, or in the street at food stalls, or not at all. Most people in Rome don't cook their own meals from scratch every day. They buy prepared food, or they eat things that don't need cooking, like bread and cheese and olives and whatever fruit is in season. You're not thinking about lunch yet, but you're probably going to buy lunch from a thermopolium, which is essentially a Roman fast food counter. They're everywhere in the city, built right into the street, with big clay pots sunk into stone counters, and inside those pots is hot food. Stews, porridge, soups, things that have been simmering since before dawn. You'll walk up, point at something, hand over a few coins, and eat it standing right there on the street, while carts roll past and people shout about wine prices. It's not fancy, but it's food, and it's warm, and that's enough. But that's later. Right now, you're still standing in your apartment, and you're realizing you need to pee. Chamber pots are a thing, obviously. There's one under the bed, and you could use it, but then you'd have to carry it down 3 flights of stairs to dump it into the street drain, and honestly you'd rather just go to the public latrine on your way to work. Public latrines in Rome are social spaces. You sit on a stone bench with holes cut into it, right next to other people also sitting on stone benches with holes cut into them, and everyone just does their business while chatting about the weather or complaining about taxes. There's no privacy. Privacy is not a Roman value. Community is a Roman value, even when you're pooping. You grab your sandals from near the door. They're leather, worn down at the heel, and the strap on the right one is starting to fray, which you've been meaning to fix for days now, but you keep forgetting. You slip them on and tie the straps around your ankles. Romans don't wear socks, which seems like it would be uncomfortable, but you're used to it. Your feet are tough. You've been walking on cobblestones and dirt roads your entire life. You step out of your apartment and into the hallway, pulling the door shut behind you. There's no lock. Locks exist, but they're expensive, and besides, what are you locking? A straw mattress and a jar of olive oil? If someone wants to steal your stuff, they're welcome to it, but they're going to be disappointed. The stairwell is narrow and dark. Light comes in through small windows at each landing, but it's not much. You can hear voices echoing from below, someone arguing about rent, someone else laughing. The stairs creak under your weight. You pass the second floor, where a woman is standing in her doorway holding a baby, and she nods at you, and you nod back. You don't know her name. You've lived in this building for 2 years, and you still don't know half your neighbours' names, but you recognise faces, and that's enough. You reach the ground floor and step out into the street, and the city hits you all at once. The noise, the smell, the movement. Rome in the morning is chaos, but it's organised chaos. The kind of chaos that knows exactly where it's going, even if it looks like a mess from the outside. The street is already crowded. Carts are rolling past, pulled by mules or oxen, loaded with amphorae full of wine or oil or garum, which is fermented fish sauce that Romans put on everything. The smell of garum is unmistakable. It's salty, pungent, oceanic, the kind of smell that you either love or hate. And if you're Roman, you love it, because garum is in every sauce, every stew, every dish that wants to taste like something other than just salt. You step to the side to avoid a cart that's rattling past at speed, and the driver doesn't even look at you. He's got places to be. Everyone has places to be. A woman walks past carrying a basket of vegetables, and behind her 2 men are arguing loudly about something involving a debt and a broken agreement, and you don't catch all the details, but the tone is unmistakably hostile. You start walking. The street is paved with large, uneven stones that have been worn smooth in some places, and are still jagged in others. Your sandals slap against the stones with each step. You're heading toward the shop where you work, which is about 10 minutes away if you walk fast, 15 if you stop to look at anything. You probably won't stop. You're not in the mood to browse. You pass a bakery, and the smell of fresh bread makes your stomach twist a little, because that bread smells incredible, and the bread you ate for breakfast was not incredible. But fresh bread costs money, and you already spent your breakfast money on oil and old bread, so you keep walking. A dog trots past you, ribs showing, looking for scraps. Rome is full of stray dogs. They live in the alleys and under the market stalls and anywhere else they can find food. Some of them are friendly, some of them are not. This one doesn't even glance at you. It's on a mission, probably heading toward the fish market where the scraps are plentiful and the competition is fierce. You pass a fountain where people are filling clay jugs with water. The fountain is public, fed by one of Rome's many aqueducts, and the water flows constantly, day and night. People are talking around the fountain, exchanging gossip, complaining about the heat even though it's still early and not that hot yet. Romans love to complain about the weather. It's too hot, it's too cold, it's too humid, it's too dry. The weather is never just right. You keep walking, and now you're passing a row of shops. There's a butcher, a fishmonger, a place that sells pottery, another place that sells sandals and leather goods. The shopkeepers are opening their shutters, setting up their displays, getting ready for the day. One of them yells a greeting at you, and you wave back without stopping. You're not here to shop, you're here to get to work. The sun is higher now, fully above the buildings, and the light is starting to warm the stones under your feet. It's going to be a hot day, you can already tell. The kind of day where the city feels like an oven by noon, and everyone retreats into the shade or the baths or anywhere with a breeze. You turn a corner and nearly walk into a man carrying a plank of wood on his shoulder. He swears at you. You apologize and step aside. The street is narrower here, and it's crowded with people all trying to move in different directions at the same time. There's a rhythm to it, a flow, and if you know the rhythm, you can move through the crowd without too much trouble. You've lived in Rome long enough to know the rhythm. You sidestep a puddle of something you don't want to identify. You duck under a hanging sign that's advertising wine. You keep moving, and your mind starts to wander, because walking through Rome is something you've done so many times that your body just does it automatically now, and your brain is free to think about other things, or nothing at all. You're thinking about breakfast again, which is strange because you just ate, but the thing about Roman breakfast is that it doesn't really stay with you. Bread and olive oil is enough to stop the immediate hunger, enough to get you out the door and into the street, but it's not enough to carry you through the morning. By mid-morning you'll be hungry again, and you'll probably buy something from a street vendor. Maybe some chickpeas roasted with salt, or a piece of flatbread with cheese melted on top, or if you're feeling slightly reckless with your money, a pastry drizzled with honey. Honey is expensive, but it's also delicious, and sometimes you need something sweet to make the day feel less like an endless march toward exhaustion. You pass a man selling fruit from a wooden cart. There are apples, figs, grapes, and something that might be plums, though it's hard to tell from this angle. The fruit looks good, dusty and sun-warm, the kind of fruit that tastes like summer. You consider stopping, but you don't. You'll buy fruit later maybe, if you have coins left at the end of the day. Right now, you need to keep moving. The shop owner you work for doesn't care if you're hungry, he cares if you're late, and being late means losing pay, and losing pay means eating even worse bread tomorrow, so you keep walking. The streets are getting more crowded now. It's that point in the morning where everyone who has somewhere to be is trying to get there at the same time. You see slaves carrying bundles, merchants shouting about their wares, children running between the adults like they're playing a game that only they understand. A slave walks past carrying a wooden board over his head, and on that board is a whole cooked pig, probably being delivered to some rich person's house for a breakfast banquet, because rich Romans don't eat bread and oil in the morning. Rich Romans eat elaborate meals with multiple courses, honeyed wine, roasted meats, exotic fruits imported from Africa or Greece or Hispania. They recline on couches while slaves serve them, and they talk about philosophy or politics or which gladiator they're betting on next week. You are not eating a roasted pig for breakfast. You're eating bread and oil, and you're walking to work, and this is fine, this is normal. This is what most people in Rome do every single day. The rich people are a tiny fraction of the population, and yet they're the ones everyone talks about, the ones who get their names carved into monuments and written into histories. But the real Rome, the everyday Rome, is people like you, walking through crowded streets, trying to make enough money to eat, hoping your sandal strap holds together for one more week. You turn onto a wider street, and the noise level somehow increases. There's a man on a corner preaching about something, maybe religion, maybe politics. It's hard to tell because he's shouting and people are shouting back, and the whole thing has the energy of an argument that's been going on for hours and will continue for several more. You ignore him and keep walking. Romans love public debate. They love standing in the street and arguing about anything and everything. The Republic might be long gone, replaced by emperors and imperial bureaucracy, but the Roman passion for loud, public disagreement is alive and well. You're almost at the shop now. You can see it up ahead, the wooden shutters already open, the owner probably inside counting inventory or yelling at someone. You work at a pottery shop, which sounds more interesting than it is. You don't make the pottery, you just sell it. You stand behind a counter and you tell people how much things cost and you wrap their purchases in cloth and you take their money. It's not thrilling work, but it's steady, and steady work is better than no work. Some days are busy, and some days are slow enough that you just stand there watching people walk past, wondering what their lives are like, wondering if they're also thinking about breakfast and whether their sandal straps are going to hold. You reach the shop and step inside. The air is cooler here, out of the sun, and it smells like clay and dust. The shop is narrow and deep, with shelves lining both walls, and on those shelves are plates, bowls, cups, oil lamps, amphorae of various sizes, all made from clay and fired in a kiln somewhere outside the city. Some of the pieces are plain, simple red or brown clay with no decoration. Some of them have patterns painted on them, geometric designs or images of gods or animals. The fancy ones cost more, obviously. People who want fancy pottery are usually willing to pay for it, but most customers just want something functional, something that holds food or water and doesn't leak. The shop owner is already here. His name is Gaius, and he's a short, perpetually irritated man in his 50s who treats every customer interaction like a personal negotiation and every slow day like a tragedy. He looks up when you walk in, grunts something that might be a greeting, and goes back to arranging amphorae near the entrance. You've worked here for almost a year, and in that time, Gaius has never once asked you how you're doing or expressed interest in your life outside of this shop. This doesn't bother you. Employment in Rome is transactional. You work, you get paid, and any relationship beyond that is optional. You move behind the counter and settle into your spot. There's a wooden stool here, and you sit on it, and you wait. Waiting is a significant part of this job. Sometimes customers come in right away, and sometimes you wait for an hour before anyone even glances through the door. You look around the shop, at the familiar arrangement of pottery, and you think about nothing in particular. Your stomach makes a small noise, reminding you that breakfast was not substantial, but you ignore it. Hunger is just part of the background noise of life, like the sound of carts outside, or the smell of olive oil that seems to permeate every building in Rome. Gaius finishes with the amphorae and walks over to the counter. He doesn't look at you directly, just stares out at the street with the expression of a man who's already tired of the day, and it's barely started. He's holding a wooden tablet covered in wax, which is where he keeps track of sales and inventory, and he's squinting at it like the numbers have personally offended him. Romans use wax tablets for temporary notes, scratching letters and numbers into the wax with a stylus, then smoothing it out and reusing it when they need to write something new. It's practical, reusable, and completely unromantic. No one's writing poetry on wax tablets. They're writing things like 3 amphorae sold, 2 cracked, 1 customer complained about price. The first customer of the day walks in, an older woman with a basket on her hip and a skeptical expression on her face. She looks around the shop like she's already decided nothing here is good enough, but she's going to look anyway because that's what you do when you need pottery. Gaius straightens up slightly, puts on what he probably thinks is a welcoming expression, but actually looks more like mild constipation, and asks her what she needs. She says she needs a new bowl because her old one cracked, and she wants something sturdy, nothing fancy, and it needs to be cheap because she's not made of money. Gaius nods like this is the most reasonable request he's ever heard, even though you know he's internally calculating exactly how much he can charge her before she walks out. You watch this interaction from behind the counter, and it's the same dance you've seen 100 times. The customer says she wants something cheap. Gaius shows her something that's moderately priced, and tells her it's the best value in Rome. She picks it up, turns it over in her hands, examines it like she's looking for flaws in a diamond, and then asks if he has anything cheaper. He sighs, the kind of sigh that's meant to convey deep personal suffering, and shows her something that actually is cheaper. She examines that one too. She's not in a hurry. No one in Rome is ever in a hurry when they're shopping, because shopping is partially about buying things and partially about the social ritual of complaining about prices and pretending you might walk away at any moment. Gaius quotes her a price. She makes a face like he's just insulted her ancestors. She offers half that price. He laughs not because it's funny, but because laughing is part of the negotiation. He counters with a price that's slightly lower than his original offer, but still higher than what she wants to pay. She shakes her head and sets the bowl down like she's about to leave. Gaius doesn't move. He's played this game too many times to panic. She picks the bowl back up. She offers a price that's slightly higher than her first offer, but still lower than his counter. He strokes his chin thoughtfully, like he's considering whether he can afford to sell pottery at this price, like he's doing her a personal favor by even entertaining this conversation. They settle on a price somewhere in the middle. She pays him in small bronze coins, counting them out one at a time into his hand. He wraps the bowl in a piece of cloth and hands it to her. She tucks it into her basket, nods at him without smiling, and walks out. The whole transaction took about 10 minutes, which is actually fast by Roman standards. Some negotiations go on for half an hour, with both parties walking away and coming back, throwing up their hands, invoking the gods, claiming poverty, claiming generosity, until finally they agree on a price, and everyone pretends they're satisfied, even though no one really is. Gaius puts the coins into a wooden box under the counter and makes a mark on his wax tablet. He looks at you and says something about how customers these days want everything for nothing, and you nod because that's what he wants you to do. You don't actually have an opinion on this, you're just here to sell pottery and collect your pay at the end of the week. Gaius goes back to fussing with the inventory, moving things around for no apparent reason, and you sit on your stool and watch the street. The sun is higher now, and the heat is starting to build. You can see it in the way people are moving, slower, staying in the shade when they can. A man walks past carrying a parasol, which is essentially a large piece of fabric stretched over a wooden frame, held above his head to block the sun. Parasols are not common among working people. They're more of a rich person accessory, but occasionally you see them in the streets, usually carried by a slave walking behind their owner. This man is carrying his own parasol, which means he's probably wealthy but not wealthy enough to have a slave follow him around all day just to hold a piece of fabric. You think about water. You didn't drink enough this morning, just that one cup, and now you're starting to feel thirsty. There's a fountain 2 streets over, and you could go get water during a slow moment, but leaving the shop means Gaius has to watch the counter alone, and he doesn't like that. He's convinced that the moment he's alone, 10 customers will walk in simultaneously, and he'll lose sales because he can't help them all at once. This has never happened in the entire time you've worked here, but Gaius believes it with absolute certainty, so you stay where you are and try not to think about how thirsty you're getting. Another customer walks in, a young man this time, maybe 20, with the look of someone who's been sent on an errand and isn't particularly happy about it. He glances around the shop like he's not sure what he's looking for, which probably means his mother or his wife sent him to buy something specific, and he wasn't paying attention when they told him what it was. This happens a lot. People wander into the shop with vague instructions and then try to figure out what they're supposed to buy by describing it in increasingly confusing terms. Gaius asks him what he needs. The young man says he needs a thing for oil, the kind you pour from, with a handle. Gaius nods slowly, which is his way of indicating that this description could apply to several different items and the customer needs to be more specific. The young man tries again. He says it's like a jug, but smaller, and his wife uses it for cooking. Gaius picks up an oil lamp, which is absolutely not what the customer described, but Gaius does this sometimes just to make people clarify their requests. The young man looks at the oil lamp and says no, not that, something you pour from. Gaius sets down the lamp and picks up a small pouring vessel with a narrow spout and a single handle. The young man's face lights up. Yes, that. Exactly that. They negotiate the price, though this customer isn't as committed to the negotiation as the previous one. He offers a slightly lower price, Gaius counters, and they settle within about 2 minutes. The young man pays, takes his purchase, and leaves, looking relieved that the errand is over. Gaius marks the sale on his tablet and mutters something about how people don't know the names of basic household items anymore, which seems like an unfair criticism given that pottery vocabulary isn't exactly something everyone memorizes, but you don't say anything. Agreeing with Gaius, or at least not disagreeing with him, is part of the job. The morning continues like this. Customers trickle in, 1 or 2 at a time. Some buy things, some just look around and leave. A woman comes in looking for a replacement oil lamp because hers cracked, and she's very specific about the size and shape she wants, and Gaius has to show her 6 different lamps before she finds one that's acceptable. A man comes in and buys 3 large bowls without any negotiation at all, which is suspicious, because no one in Rome pays the asking price without at least attempting to negotiate, but Gaius takes his money and doesn't ask questions. Maybe the man is rich, or maybe he's in a hurry, or maybe he just doesn't care. It's impossible to know, and it doesn't really matter. You're getting hungrier. It's mid-morning now, and the bread and oil you ate hours ago has completely worn off. Your stomach is making noises, quiet little complaints that no one else can hear but you're very aware of. You're thinking about lunch, about what you're going to buy, and where you're going to buy it. There's a thermopolium 3 streets from here that sells a decent lentil stew, thick and salty with chunks of bread floating in it. That's probably what you'll get. It's cheap, it's filling, and you can eat it quickly and get back to the shop without Gaius complaining that you took too long. Outside, the street is getting busier. It's that mid-morning rush when everyone who didn't leave at dawn is finally heading out, and everyone who left at dawn is coming back for a break or to buy something. The noise level is constant now, a low roar of voices and cartwheels and animals and people selling things. Someone is shouting about fresh fish, their voice cutting through the general chaos with the kind of practiced volume that comes from years of street vending. Someone else is arguing with someone else about something, and their voices are angry but not violent, just loud, the way Romans argue when they're passionate about being right but not actually interested in fighting. Gaius tells you to reorganize the oil lamps on the left shelf because apparently they're not arranged properly, even though they look exactly the same as they did yesterday when he said they were fine. You stand up from your stool, walk over to the shelf and start moving oil lamps around. Oil lamps are one of the most common items in the shop because everyone needs them. Romans don't have electricity, obviously, so when the sun goes down you either sit in the dark or you light a lamp. Oil lamps are small clay vessels with a hole for a wick and a reservoir for olive oil. You pour oil into the reservoir, light the wick, and you have light. It's not bright light, not like what you're used to, but it's enough to see by, enough to move around your apartment without walking into furniture. The lamps come in different sizes and styles. Some are plain and functional, some have decorative reliefs on them, little images of gods or animals or geometric patterns. Some have multiple wicks for more light. Rich people have elaborate bronze lamps with multiple arms, like small chandeliers, but those aren't sold here. This shop caters to regular people who need regular pottery at regular prices. You move the lamps around, grouping them by size, even though you're fairly certain this doesn't matter, and Gaius will probably ask you to rearrange them again tomorrow according to some different system that makes sense only to him. While you're doing this, you hear a crash from outside, followed by shouting. You look toward the door, and through the opening you can see a cart has tipped over in the street. Amphorae have rolled everywhere, some of them broken, oil or wine spreading across the cobblestones in dark puddles. The cart driver is yelling at someone, probably whoever bumped into his cart and caused this disaster. A small crowd is gathering, not to help, but to watch, because Romans love street drama. Someone's trying to save the unbroken amphorae, someone else is arguing about who's responsible for the mess. A dog appears from nowhere and starts licking the spilled liquid, which is either brave or stupid depending on what's in those amphorae. Gaius walks to the door and watches for a moment, shaking his head like this is exactly the kind of chaos he expects from the world. He mutters something about incompetent cart drivers and goes back inside. You finish arranging the lamps and return to your stool. The crash outside is already being resolved. People are picking up the broken pottery, someone's brought out a bucket of sand to soak up the liquid, and the cart is being righted. In 10 minutes it'll be like nothing happened, except for the dark stain on the cobblestones and the cart driver's ruined day. You sit and wait. Waiting is the dominant activity in this job. Waiting for customers, waiting for Gaius to give you instructions, waiting for the day to end. You're not bored exactly. Boredom is a luxury. You're just existing in the space between tasks, letting your mind wander, thinking about breakfast and lunch, and whether you'll have enough energy to stop at the public baths after work. The baths are crowded in the evening, full of people washing off the day's sweat and grime, but they're also warm and relaxing, and after standing in a pottery shop all day, the idea of sitting in hot water sounds almost transcendent. A customer walks in, an older man with a weathered face and hands that look like they've done decades of hard labor. He doesn't browse. He walks straight to the amphorae section and picks one up, checking the weight, looking at the seal. He's buying it for practical reasons, probably to store grain or oil or wine. He carries it to the counter, asks the price, and when Gaius tells him, he just nods and pays without negotiating. This is rare. Most people negotiate on principle, even if the price is fair, but this man clearly doesn't have time for that. He pays, picks up the amphora, tucks it under one arm like it weighs nothing, and walks out. The whole interaction took less than 2 minutes. Gaius counts the coins and seems pleased, which is as close to happy as he gets. He makes another mark on his wax tablet, and then announces that he's going to step out for a while, which means you're in charge of the shop. This happens occasionally. Gaius has errands to run, or people to see, or he just gets tired of standing in the shop and wants to walk around the city for a bit. When he leaves, you're supposed to handle any customers who come in, make sales, and not lose any money or break anything. It's not complicated, but it does mean you have to pay attention, which is harder when you're hungry and slightly thirsty, and your mind keeps drifting to thoughts of lentil stew. Gaius leaves, and the shop feels different immediately. Quieter, somehow, even though the noise from the street hasn't changed. You're alone with rows of pottery, and the responsibility of watching over it all settles on your shoulders in a way that's not quite heavy, but definitely present. You stand up and walk around the shop, stretching your legs, looking at the merchandise like you're a customer browsing, instead of the person who's supposed to be selling it. You've been here long enough that you know every piece, every crack, every slight imperfection. That bowl on the third shelf has a wobble if you set it down wrong. That amphora near the door has a small chip on the rim that Gaius pretends isn't there. That oil lamp with the dolphin design has been here for 3 months and no one's bought it because dolphins are not as popular as you'd think. A woman walks in with 2 children, both under 10, both loud. The children immediately start touching everything within reach, and the woman doesn't stop them, just tells them to be careful in a tone that suggests she's said this 1,000 times and knows it won't make a difference. You watch nervously as one child picks up a cup and the other child reaches for a bowl. The woman is looking at plates, turning them over, checking for cracks. She's methodical about it, inspecting each one carefully before setting it down and moving to the next. The children continue their exploration of the shop, and you're calculating in your head how much it's going to cost if one of them drops something, and whether Gaius will blame you for not preventing it. Miraculously, nothing breaks. The woman selects 2 plates, negotiates the price down slightly, pays, and leaves with her children, who are now arguing about something completely unrelated to pottery. You exhale slowly, relieved that the shop is still intact. You sit back down on your stool and realize your mouth is dry. You really need water. You glance toward the door, considering whether you have time to run to the fountain and back before another customer shows up, or before Gaius returns. It's a gamble. If you leave and miss a customer, Gaius will know because he tracks inventory obsessively, and he'll notice if something was moved but not sold. If you leave and Gaius comes back to an empty shop, he'll assume you abandoned your post, and you'll get a lecture about responsibility and commitment, and how young people today don't understand the value of work. You decide to wait. You can handle being thirsty for a while longer. Romans are good at handling discomfort. It's practically a cultural trait. You sit, and you wait, and you watch the street, and after a while your mind starts doing that thing it does when you're understimulated and slightly uncomfortable, where it just wanders off into strange territories. You think about breakfast again, about how strange it is that the most powerful civilization in the world starts its day with bread and oil. You think about the emperor, whoever the emperor is right now. You're not actually sure because emperors change sometimes and news travels slowly, and you don't pay that much attention to politics. You wonder if the emperor eats bread and oil for breakfast, or if he has elaborate morning feasts with exotic foods you've never heard of. You're pretty sure the emperor doesn't eat bread and oil. The emperor probably wakes up in a palace with marble floors and fountains in every room, and slaves bring him breakfast on silver platters, and there's roasted meat and fresh fruit and honeyed wine and pastries made by professional bakers who've spent years perfecting their craft. The emperor probably doesn't even think about breakfast. He just sits down, or more likely reclines on a couch, and food appears in front of him like magic, except it's not magic. It's just slavery and wealth, and the way power works in Rome. You'll never meet the emperor. You'll never see the inside of the palace. You'll probably never eat breakfast off a silver platter. This doesn't make you angry or sad. It's just how things are. Rome has emperors, and it has pottery shop workers, and you happen to be the latter, and that's fine. A man walks past the shop carrying a chicken under his arm. The chicken is alive and does not look happy about its situation. Flapping and squawking while the man holds it firmly and keeps walking like this is a completely normal thing to do, which it is. Live chickens are a common sight in Roman streets. People buy them at the market and carry them home for dinner, or they keep them for eggs, or they sacrifice them to the gods if they're feeling particularly pious or desperate. This chicken's fate is unknown, but it's probably not great. The man turns a corner and disappears, and the chicken's protests fade into the general noise of the city. You're thinking about meat now, which is a mistake, because thinking about meat when you're hungry just makes you hungrier. Meat is expensive. You don't eat it often, maybe once a week, if you're being financially responsible, more often if you're being reckless. There's a butcher a few streets over who sells pork and occasionally beef, and the smell that comes from that shop is enough to make you stop and consider spending money you shouldn't spend. But you usually resist. You eat bread, cheese, olives, lentils, chickpeas, onions, whatever vegetables are in season and affordable. Meat is a luxury, something you save for special occasions or days when you've had enough of lentils and you're willing to sacrifice tomorrow's financial security for today's satisfaction. Gaius returns, looking slightly less irritated than when he left, which probably means whatever errand he ran went well. He nods at you, asks if there were any sales, and you tell him about the woman with the plates. He grunts, makes a mark on his tablet, and resumes his position near the front of the shop, watching the street like a predator watching for prey. You return to your stool and you're waiting. The morning is stretching into midday now, the sun is directly overhead, and the heat is becoming oppressive. The shop is cooler than the street, but not by much. Clay doesn't insulate particularly well, and the heat seeps in through the walls and the open door. You're definitely going to get lunch soon. Your stomach has progressed from quiet complaints to more insistent demands. You can feel the emptiness in your belly, that hollow sensation that makes it hard to think about anything except food. You're imagining the thermopolium now, the big clay pots sunk into the counter, steam rising from whatever's been cooking since dawn. You're imagining the smell, rich and salty and savoury. You're imagining the first bite of stew, hot and thick, the lentils soft and the broth flavoured with garum and herbs. You're imagining bread dipped into the stew, soaking up all that flavour. Your mouth is actually watering now, which is embarrassing, but no one can see it, so it doesn't matter. Gaius looks at you and seems to notice that you're staring into space with the expression of someone who's thinking very hard about food. He asks if you're hungry. You say yes. He says you can take a break for lunch, but be quick about it, and don't spend too much money because you're not getting paid until the end of the week. This is classic Gaius, offering permission for something you need to do anyway, and then immediately adding a criticism or a warning. You stand up, thank him, and head for the door. The heat hits you the moment you step outside. It's that middle-of-the-day heat that makes the air feel thick and the sun feel personal, like it's specifically targeting you for discomfort. The street is less crowded now than it was earlier. Smart people are inside during the hottest part of the day, staying in the shade, waiting for the afternoon to cool down slightly. But you're not smart people. You're hungry people. You start walking toward the thermopolium, moving quickly, because Gaius meant it when he said be quick, and also because the faster you walk, the sooner you get to eat. The thermopolium is on a busy corner, built into the ground floor of an apartment building, with a wide counter facing the street. The counter is stone, and set into the stone are large clay pots, called dolia, and inside those pots is food. Hot food. Food that's been simmering for hours. You can see steam rising from the pots, and you can smell everything at once. Lentils, chickpeas, some kind of stew with vegetables, something that might be pork, or might be mystery meat, you can't tell from here. There's a man working behind the counter, middle-aged, sweating, stirring one of the pots with a long wooden spoon. He's been doing this all morning, serving people, taking money, refilling pots, and he'll keep doing it all afternoon until the food runs out or the day ends. You walk up to the counter and look into the pots. The lentil stew looks good, thick and brown, with pieces of carrot and onion visible in the broth. There's also a chickpea dish that's more like a thick porridge, and a pot of what looks like barley with vegetables. You ask for the lentil stew. The man nods, ladles a generous portion into a clay bowl, and hands it to you along with a piece of bread. You pay him, and the cost is reasonable, about what you expected, enough to make a small dent in your money but not enough to ruin your week. You take the bowl and the bread and step to the side of the counter, because this is where you eat. You don't take the food back to the shop. You don't sit down at a table, because there are no tables. You just stand there on the street, holding your bowl, and you eat. This is how most Romans eat lunch. Standing up, on the street, quickly, because lunch is not a social event, lunch is fuel. You dip the bread into the stew and take a bite, and it's exactly as good as you imagined. The lentils are soft, almost creamy, and the broth is salty and rich with garum. The bread soaks up the liquid and becomes soft and flavorful. You eat quickly, not because you're in a desperate hurry, but because the food is hot, and you're hungry and stopping to think about it would just slow you down. Around you, other people are doing the same thing. A man in a toga, which means he's a citizen with some level of status, is eating chickpeas from a bowl while reading something on a wax tablet. A woman is feeding bites of bread to a small child while eating her own lunch with her other hand. Two men are standing together, eating and talking, their conversation animated but not loud. This is lunchtime in Rome. No one sits down for an hour. No one has a leisurely meal with multiple courses. You eat, you finish, you get back to whatever you were doing. You finish the stew and use the last piece of bread to wipe the bowl clean, because wasting food is not something you do when food costs money, and money is limited. You hand the empty bowl back to the man behind the counter. He takes it without comment and drops it into a bucket of water where other bowls are soaking, waiting to be reused for the next customer. Hygiene in ancient Rome is not what you'd call rigorous. The bowls get rinsed in water that's probably been sitting there all day, and then they're reused. No one gets sick from this, or rather, people probably do get sick from this, but they get sick from lots of things, and no one's making the connection between dirty bowls and illness, because germ theory won't be discovered for another 1800 years or so. You walk back toward the shop, and your stomach feels better now, full and satisfied in a way that makes the rest of the day seem slightly more manageable. The heat is still oppressive, and you're still thirsty, but at least you're not hungry anymore. You pass the same shops you passed on the way to the Thermopolium, but you're walking slower now, less urgently, because the immediate crisis of hunger has been resolved. A cat is sleeping in a patch of shade near a doorway, completely unbothered by the noise and heat. Cats are everywhere in Rome. They live in the alleys, the markets, the temples, anywhere there's food scraps or mice. This cat is orange and fat, which means it's good at finding food, or someone's been feeding it regularly. You're about halfway back to the shop when you see someone you know. His name is Marcus, and he works at a bakery a few streets over. You've known him for maybe 6 months, ever since you started stopping at his bakery on your way home from work. He's around your age, maybe a little older, and he's covered in flour right now, white dust all over his tunic and his arms. He sees you and waves, and you stop to talk because that's what you do when you see someone you know in Rome. You don't just walk past, you stop, you exchange a few words, you acknowledge each other's existence. Marcus asks how the pottery business is going. You say it's fine, same as always. He nods like he understands, because everyone's job is the same as always. He tells you the bakery's been busy today, which is good for business but exhausting for him. He's been up since before dawn, kneading dough, stoking the oven, pulling out loaves of bread and replacing them with new ones. His hands are probably raw from the heat and the work, but he doesn't complain about it. Complaining about work is something you do with close friends or family, not with casual acquaintances on the street. You ask him if he ate lunch yet. He says no. He'll grab something when there's a break in customers, maybe in an hour or two. You mention the Thermopolium and the lentil stew, and he says he might go there, or he might just eat some bread from the bakery because that's easier and free. One of the benefits of working at a bakery is that you're surrounded by bread all day, and your boss usually lets you eat the stuff that's slightly burnt or misshapen, the loaves that can't be sold but are still perfectly edible. It's not the most exciting lunch, bread with maybe some olive oil or cheese if you brought it from home, but it's efficient, and it doesn't cost anything. You talk for another minute about nothing important, just the kind of small talk that fills the space between people who know each other, but aren't particularly close. He mentions that there's going to be some kind of festival next week, something involving a procession and sacrifices to one of the gods. He's not sure which one. You say you might go watch if you have time, even though you probably won't, because festivals are crowded and loud, and you spend enough time around crowds as it is. He agrees, says he probably won't go either, but then admits he might go anyway because there's usually free food at festivals if you know where to look, and free food is hard to turn down. You say goodbye and continue walking. Marcus heads off in the opposite direction, back toward the bakery, and you watch him go for a moment before turning back toward the pottery shop. The interaction was brief and largely meaningless, but it's also the kind of thing that makes a day feel less monotonous. Seeing a familiar face, exchanging a few words, being reminded that other people exist, and they're all doing their own version of what you're doing, working and eating, and getting through the day. Rome is enormous, hundreds of thousands of people all crammed into a relatively small area, and it would be easy to feel completely anonymous, but these small interactions, these brief acknowledgements, they make the city feel slightly less overwhelming. You arrive back at the shop, and Gaius is helping a customer, an elderly man who's being very particular about the size of bowl he wants. He's holding up different bowls, comparing them, setting them down, picking them up again, and Gaius is demonstrating the patience of someone who's dealt with indecisive customers for decades. You slip behind the counter and return to your stool, and you watch the negotiation unfold. The elderly man eventually settles on a bowl, they agree on a price after some back and forth, and he leaves, walking slowly, cradling the bowl in his arms like it's precious. Gaius turns to you and asks if lunch was good. You say yes. He nods and returns to his spot near the front of the shop. The afternoon stretches ahead, long and hot and slow. This is the worst part of the day, the hours between lunch and evening when time seems to move differently, when each minute feels longer than it should, when you're no longer hungry but you're tired and slightly uncomfortable, and there's still so much day left. The shop is quiet, customers don't come in as frequently during the afternoon heat. People are staying home, resting, waiting for the temperature to drop before venturing out again. You sit on your stool, and you let your mind wander. You think about tonight, about what you'll do after work. You'll probably go back to your apartment, eat something simple for dinner, bread and cheese, and maybe some olives if you bought them yesterday. You might go to the baths if you have the energy, or you might just stay in your room and lie down and listen to the sounds of the city through your thin walls. You'll fall asleep eventually, and then you'll wake up tomorrow morning, and you'll eat bread and oil for breakfast, and you'll walk through the streets to the pottery shop, and you'll do this all over again. This is life in Rome. This is what it means to be an ordinary person in an extraordinary city. You're not building aqueducts or conquering provinces or writing philosophy. You're selling pottery and eating lentils and trying to make enough money to survive. Your name won't be recorded in any history book. No one will remember you specifically, but you're here, you're part of this vast machine called Rome, and your small life is just as real as the lives of emperors and senators and generals. You wake up, you eat, you work, you sleep, you do it again the next day. This is the rhythm of existence, the pattern that billions of humans have followed throughout history and will continue to follow long after Rome is gone. A fly buzzes near your face, and you wave it away. The fly is persistent, comes back, and you wave it away again. Flies are constant companions in Roman streets and shops. They're attracted to food, to waste, to anything organic and slightly decaying. There's no way to get rid of them permanently. You just coexist with them, batting them away when they get too annoying, ignoring them the rest of the time. The fly lands on the counter, and you watch it for a moment, its tiny legs moving, its wings occasionally twitching. It has no idea it's in Rome, no concept of empire or civilization or history. It's just a fly, looking for food, trying to survive, same as you. Gaius announces that he's going to check on something in the back room, which is where he keeps extra inventory and supplies. The back room is small and dark and full of dust, and you've only been in there a few times. Gaius disappears through the doorway, and you're alone in the front of the shop again. The street outside is quiet now, the afternoon lull in full effect. You can hear birds somewhere, sparrows probably, chirping from a rooftop or a tree. You can hear someone singing in the distance, a woman's voice, high and clear, though you can't make out the words. You can hear the ever-present sound of wheels on stone, a cart somewhere out of sight, moving through the city. You stand up and stretch, rolling your shoulders, trying to work out the stiffness that comes from sitting on a wooden stool for hours. Your back hurts a little, that dull ache that settles into your lower spine when you've been in one position too long. You walk around the shop slowly, not because you have anything to do, but because moving feels better than sitting. You run your hand along the edge of one of the shelves, feeling the rough wood, the splinters that never quite got sanded down properly. You look at a large amphora near the back of the shop, the kind used for storing wine or oil, and you notice there's a small crack running up one side. It's not a serious crack, not the kind that would make the amphora useless, but it's there, and you wonder if Gaius knows about it, or if he's hoping a customer won't notice. The afternoon light is changing, becoming slightly less harsh, less white-hot and more golden. It's still hot, but there's a sense that the worst of the heat is passing, that evening is coming eventually, even if it's still hours away. You return to your stool and sit down, and you realize you're thirsty again. The lentil stew was salty, which was good while you were eating it, but now it's making you crave water. You should have stopped at the fountain on the way back from lunch, but you didn't, and now you're sitting here thinking about water the same way you were thinking about food earlier. Gaius emerges from the back room carrying a small amphora, which he sets down near the front of the shop. He mutters something about organization, about how nothing stays where it's supposed to be, and you nod sympathetically even though you have no idea what he's talking about. He seems satisfied with having moved the amphora and returns to his position by the door. A customer walks by, glances into the shop, doesn't stop. Another person walks by, same thing. People are starting to venture out again now that the heat is slightly more bearable, but they're not in buying moods yet. They're just walking, heading somewhere else, passing through. You think about breakfast again, about how strange it is that this day started with bread and oil, and now here you are, hours later, still in the pottery shop, still waiting. Time in Rome doesn't move the way time moves in your modern life. There are no clocks on the wall, no phones to check, no constant awareness of exactly what time it is. You know it's afternoon because the sun is in a certain position. You know it's getting closer to evening because the light is changing. You measure time by the movement of shadows, by the rhythm of the city, by the feeling in your body that tells you whether it's morning or afternoon or night. The Romans do have ways of measuring time, technically. There are sundials in public spaces, and water clocks in some wealthy homes, and the day is divided into 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness. But the length of an hour changes depending on the season, because they're measuring from sunrise to sunset, which means a summer hour is longer than a winter hour, which makes absolutely no sense by modern standards, but makes perfect sense if you're living in a world without artificial light. You work when the sun is up, you rest when the sun is down, and the specific numerical hour doesn't matter as much as the general position of the sun in the sky. A woman walks into the shop, finally, a customer. She's well dressed, her tunic is clean, and made from better fabric than what most people wear, and she has jewelry, a simple bronze bracelet on one wrist. She's probably not wealthy, but she's comfortable. She has money to spend on things beyond basic survival. She looks around the shop with the air of someone who knows what she wants, and is just looking for the right version of it. Gaius steps forward to help her, and you watch from your stool as they begin the familiar dance of customer and merchant. She's looking for serving dishes, she says, something nice but not too expensive, for dinner parties. Gaius nods and leads her to a section of the shop where the nicer pottery is displayed. These pieces have designs on them, painted decorations in red and black, geometric patterns, or simple images of vines and flowers. They're more expensive than the plain pottery, but not by an enormous amount. They're for people who want their dinner parties to look slightly more sophisticated, but who aren't wealthy enough to own silver serving dishes. The woman picks up a shallow bowl with a vine pattern around the rim. She examines it closely, turning it over, checking for imperfections. She sets it down and picks up another one, this time with a geometric design. She seems to prefer this one, holding it a little longer, tilting it to catch the light. Gaius tells her about the craftsmanship, about how it was made by a skilled potter who's been working in Rome for years, and you're not sure if this is true, or if Gaius just says this to every customer, but it sounds convincing. They negotiate the price. The woman is good at this, better than most customers. She doesn't accept his first price, but she doesn't lowball him either. She makes a reasonable counteroffer, and Gaius counters that, and they go back and forth a few times, before settling on something that seems to satisfy both of them. She's buying 3 serving bowls, and Gaius wraps each one carefully in cloth before placing them in a basket she brought with her. She pays, thanks him politely, and leaves. The whole interaction was professional, efficient, almost pleasant. These are the best kind of customers, the ones who know what they want and are willing to pay a fair price for it. Gaius counts the money and looks more satisfied than he's been all day. 3 serving bowls at a decent price is good business, enough to make the slow afternoon feel worth it. He makes his marks on the wax tablet and then tells you that you can leave early today if you want, which is completely out of character for him and makes you suspicious that he's either in an unusually good mood or he has something else to do and wants the shop to himself. You don't question it, you just thank him, stand up from your stool, and head for the door. The street is busier now than it was an hour ago. The heat has dropped enough that people are willing to be outside again, and there's that early evening energy starting to build, the sense that the workday is ending and the evening is beginning. Shops are still open, but vendors are starting to think about packing up. The light is golden and warm, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. You start walking, not toward your apartment yet, but just walking, because after sitting all day, moving feels good. You pass a group of children playing some kind of game that involves running and shouting and pushing each other, and no adult is supervising them, because Roman children are expected to supervise themselves. You pass a man selling flowers from a basket, calling out about how fresh they are, how perfect for offerings to the household gods. You pass a slave carrying a large bundle of cloth, probably taking it to a fuller's shop to be cleaned. Fullers clean clothes by stomping on them in tubs of water, mixed with urine and other substances, which sounds disgusting but apparently works, because Romans don't have washing machines, and they need some way to clean their clothes. You're walking without a specific destination, and this is unusual for you. Usually you have somewhere to be, something to do, but right now, in this moment, you're just walking through Rome, watching the city, being part of it. You pass a temple, small and old, dedicated to some god whose name you don't remember. The temple is quiet, no one going in or out, just sitting there being a temple, fulfilling its purpose by existing. You pass a wine shop, where men are standing outside drinking and talking loudly, their faces flushed from heat and alcohol. You pass a bookshop, which is really just a small room with scrolls stacked on shelves, and through the doorway you can see someone unrolling a scroll and reading, their lips moving as they sound out the words. You realize you're walking in the direction of the public baths, and once you realize this, it becomes your actual destination. The baths sound perfect right now. You're sweaty and dusty from the day, and the idea of hot water and steam, and being clean, sounds almost luxurious. The baths are one of the great democratic institutions of Rome. Rich and poor both go to the baths, though not necessarily to the same baths, and not necessarily at the same times, but the basic experience is available to almost everyone for a small entrance fee. You have enough coins left from today to afford it, and you decide that you're going, that you deserve this small pleasure, after a long day of standing in a pottery shop. The bathhouse you usually go to is about 10 minutes away, a mid-sized building with brick walls and a tile roof, nothing fancy but clean and well maintained. As you get closer, you can hear the noise coming from inside, the echo of voices bouncing off stone walls, the splash of water, the general chaos of dozens of people all bathing and socializing at the same time. The entrance is through a small doorway, and you step inside and pay your fee to an attendant, who looks bored and doesn't make eye contact. He hands you a small metal token, and you move into the changing room. The changing room is just a large space with benches along the walls and pegs for hanging clothes. There are already people here, some undressing, some getting dressed, some just sitting and talking. You find an empty spot on a bench and start removing your tunic and sandals. There are no lockers, no secure storage, you just leave your clothes on the bench or hanging on a peg and hope no one steals them. Theft happens sometimes, but not often enough that people stop using the baths. You're not wearing anything valuable anyway, your tunic is old and your sandals are falling apart. A thief would be disappointed. You're naked now, because Romans bathe naked, and you head into the bath complex proper. The first room is the tepidarium, the warm room, where the temperature is mild, and people are sitting on benches or standing around talking. The air is humid and smells like wet stone and human bodies. You don't stop here, you move through to the coldarium, the hot room, where the temperature jumps significantly, and steam fills the air so thick you can barely see across the room. The heat hits you like a physical thing, wrapping around your body, making you sweat immediately. There's a large pool of hot water in the center of the room, and people are in it, soaking, their faces red from the heat. You step into the water carefully because it's extremely hot, almost painfully hot, and you have to ease yourself in gradually. Once you're fully submerged up to your shoulders, the heat becomes bearable, almost pleasant. You find a spot along the edge of the pool and settle in, letting the hot water work on your muscles, on the ache in your back, on the general fatigue of the day. Around you, people are talking. 2 men near you are discussing business, something about a shipment that was delayed, and whether the merchant they're dealing with is trustworthy. A group of younger men on the other side of the pool are laughing about something, probably a joke or a story, their voices loud and echoing off the walls. An older man is sitting alone, eyes closed, completely still, either deeply relaxed or possibly asleep. The baths are social spaces as much as they are places for washing. People come here to see and be seen, to gossip, to conduct business, to escape their crowded apartments for a few hours. You close your eyes and let yourself float in the sensation of heat and water. Your mind empties out, stops thinking about pottery and breakfast and money and all the small concerns that filled the day. You just exist in this moment, hot and wet and gradually getting cleaner as the water works on the sweat and dirt accumulated over hours in the shop. Time passes, you're not sure how much, and eventually the heat becomes too much, and you climb out of the pool, water streaming off your body, and you move to the next room. The next room is cooler, a transition space where people sit and let their body temperature drop before moving on. There are attendants here offering services, slaves who will scrape the oil and dirt off your skin with a strigil, which is a curved metal tool that looks vaguely like a question mark. Romans don't use soap, they cover themselves in olive oil, let it mix with the sweat and dirt on their skin, and then scrape it all off with a strigil. It's effective apparently, though it seems like it would be uncomfortable. You've never paid for this service, you just rinse off in the water and call it good enough. You move through to the frigidarium, the cold room, where there's a pool of cold water that's meant to close your pores and refresh your body after the heat. Some people love the cold plunge, they jump in with enthusiasm, gasping and laughing as the cold water shocks their system. You are not one of these people. You approach the cold pool with caution, dip one foot in, reconsider your life choices, and then force yourself to get in quickly before you can change your mind. The cold is brutal, takes your breath away, makes your heart race. You stay in for maybe 30 seconds, which feels like an eternity, and then climb out, shivering and wide awake. There are towels available, rough linen cloths that are communal and slightly damp from being used by multiple people, but they work well enough. You dry off quickly, rubbing warmth back into your skin, and then you head back to the changing room to get dressed. Your tunic is still where you left it, no one stole it, which is a small victory. You pull it on over your damp skin, tie your sandals, and feel significantly better than when you arrived, clean, relaxed, refreshed. The baths have worked their magic. You leave the bathhouse and step back into the evening air, and the city looks different now. The sun is lower, the shadows longer, the light softer and more golden. The temperature has dropped enough that being outside is actually pleasant. People are everywhere, the streets crowded with evening activities. Food vendors are doing brisk business, selling dinner to people who don't want to cook or don't have kitchens. Wine shops are full, voices spilling out into the street along with the smell of wine and oil lamps. You start walking toward your apartment, and you're hungry again, which seems impossible given that you ate lunch only a few hours ago, but your body doesn't care about logic. The bath used energy, and now your stomach is reminding you that dinner is a thing that needs to happen. You stop at a stall selling flatbread with toppings, and you buy one topped with cheese and onions. The vendor hands it to you wrapped in a piece of cloth, and it's still warm from the oven. You eat it while walking, tearing off pieces and chewing as you navigate the crowded streets. The bread is crispy on the outside, soft on the inside, and the cheese is melted and slightly greasy in a way that's deeply satisfying. The onions are sweet and caramelized, adding flavor without being overwhelming. This is good bread, better than the breakfast bread, and you savor it, taking your time, making it last. By the time you reach your apartment building, you've finished eating, and your fingers are greasy with oil and cheese. You wipe them on your tunic because that's what you do. Laundry happens once a week or so when you take your clothes to the fuller, and until then, your tunic just accumulates stains, and smells, and evidence of meals eaten. You climb the stairs to your apartment, 3 flights up, your legs protesting slightly because they've been walking and standing all day and they're tired. The stairwell is darker now than it was this morning, the light from the small windows fading as evening settles in. You can hear sounds from behind closed doors as you climb, conversations and arguments, and the clatter of dishes, the sounds of people living their lives in small spaces. Someone is cooking something that smells like onions and garlic. Someone else is singing, off-key but enthusiastic. A baby is crying on the second floor, that particular exhausted wail that suggests it's been crying for a while and will continue crying for a while longer. You reach your door and push it open. The room is dim, the last of the daylight coming through the window in weak grey-blue tones. You don't light a lamp yet, you just stand there for a moment, letting your eyes adjust, feeling the familiarity of your own space after a day of being in other spaces. Your apartment is small and plain and not particularly comfortable, but it's yours, in the sense that you pay rent for it and no one else lives here. That's worth something in a city as crowded as Rome. You walk to the small table and sit down on the stool, the same stool you sat on this morning when you ate breakfast. Was that really only this morning? It feels like days ago, like breakfast happened in some distant past, but it was just this morning. Just bread and olive oil, just the beginning of this long, ordinary day. You're tired now, the kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes even simple movements feel like effort. Your feet hurt, your back hurts, your eyes feel dry and scratchy from the heat and the dust. You have a few olives left in a small clay bowl, and you eat them slowly, spitting the pits into your hand, and then dropping them onto the table. The olives are salty and oily and slightly bitter, and they're not really enough to count as dinner, but combined with the flatbread you ate earlier, they're sufficient. You're not going hungry tonight. You won't wake up in the middle of the night with your stomach cramping from emptiness. This is a good day by Roman standards. You worked, you earned money, you ate 3 times, you bathed. These are not small accomplishments. Outside, the city is transitioning into night mode. The noise is different now, less commercial, more social. You can hear laughter from somewhere, probably a tavern or a wine shop. You can hear music, someone playing a flute, the notes floating through the air. You can hear the ever-present sound of conversation, Romans talking to each other about everything and nothing, because talking is what Romans do. Silence makes them uncomfortable. They fill every space with words, with opinions, with stories and jokes and arguments. You stand up and walk to the window, looking out over the street below. Oil lamps are being lit in windows and doorways, small points of warm light appearing as the natural light fades. The lamps don't provide much illumination, just enough to see by, just enough to push back the darkness a little. The street below is still active, people moving through the shadows, heading home or heading out, depending on their plans for the evening. A cart rattles past, late for some delivery. 2 men walk by arguing about something, their voices loud and animated. A dog barks in the distance. You think about lighting your own lamp, but you're too tired to bother. The darkness is fine. The darkness is actually peaceful after a day of bright sun and noise and constant activity. You leave the window and move to your bed, which is really just a wooden frame with that straw-filled mattress on top of it. You lie down without undressing because you're already wearing your sleeping clothes, which are the same as your day clothes, which are the same tunic you've been wearing all day. The mattress is lumpy and slightly itchy, but you're used to it. You lie on your back and stare up at the ceiling, which you can barely see in the darkness. There are cracks in the plaster up there, because you've stared at them many times before. There's a water stain in one corner from when it rained last month and the roof leaked. The landlord said he would fix it, but he hasn't, and he probably won't, because landlords in Rome are not known for their prompt maintenance. Your mind is winding down, thoughts becoming slower and less coherent. You think about tomorrow, about how you'll wake up and eat bread and oil again and walk to the pottery shop again and stand behind the counter again. The same routine, the same rhythm. This might sound depressing from the outside, this repetitive cycle of work and eating and sleeping, but it's not depressing when you're living it. It's just life. It's just what you do. Everyone's doing some version of this, whether they're selling pottery or baking bread or working in the fields or commanding legions. Everyone wakes up, everyone eats, everyone tries to get through the day. You think about breakfast one more time, about that piece of bread and that olive oil, about how simple it was and how it was enough. Roman breakfast isn't elaborate or exciting or particularly delicious, but it serves its purpose. It gets you out of bed and into the world. It provides the energy you need to start the day. That's all breakfast needs to do, really. The rest of the day will bring its own challenges and small pleasures, its own meals and conversations and moments of heat and cold and hunger and satisfaction. You hear footsteps on the stairs outside, someone coming home late. You hear a door open and close. You hear the murmur of voices, too quiet to make out the words but loud enough to know people are talking. The building settles around you, making those small creaking noises that old buildings make, wood and stone and clay all shifting slightly as the temperature drops and the day finally, truly ends. Your breathing slows. Your body relaxes into the mattress, finding the familiar valleys and lumps, knowing where to position your shoulders and hips to minimize discomfort. Sleep is coming. You can feel it approaching. That gentle descent into unconsciousness. Tomorrow will be another day of bread and oil, another day of pottery and streets and heat and hunger. But that's tomorrow. Right now, you're here, in your small room, in your uncomfortable bed, in this massive city full of millions of people all doing the same thing you're doing, all trying to survive, all eating their simple breakfasts and living their ordinary lives. The last thing you think about before sleep takes you is the taste of olive oil, that thick, grassy, slightly bitter taste that coated your mouth this morning and will coat it again tomorrow morning. It's become the taste of morning itself, the taste of waking up, the taste of Rome. And then you're asleep, and the day is over, and breakfast is many hours away, waiting for you in the future, simple and sufficient and exactly what you'll need when the sun rises again and the city wakes up and the whole cycle begins once more. You drift deeper into sleep. The sounds of the city fade into background noise, distant and unimportant. Your dreams, if you have them, are probably mundane, probably about pottery or walking or bread, because your unconscious mind doesn't have much material to work with beyond your daily experience. Romans don't dream about smartphones or cars or electric lights. They dream about the things they know, the things they see every day, the ordinary details of ordinary life. Morning comes eventually, the way morning always comes, indifferent to whether you're ready for it. The sky outside your window shifts from black to deep blue to grey, and light starts to seep into your room. You're not awake yet, still deep in sleep, but somewhere in your unconscious mind, your body knows that dawn is approaching. Birds start making noise, sparrows and pigeons and other Roman birds whose names you don't know. They're loud and insistent, announcing the day, claiming territory, doing whatever it is that birds do at dawn. You wake up slowly, gradually becoming aware of your body, of the mattress beneath you, of the light in the room. Your eyes open, and you stare at the ceiling for a moment, seeing those familiar cracks, that water stain, the rough plaster that's never been properly finished. You're still tired. You were tired when you went to sleep, and you're still tired now, because one night of sleep isn't enough to erase the accumulated fatigue of weeks and months of work. But being tired doesn't matter. The day is here, and you have to participate in it whether you're ready or not. You sit up, and your back protests. Sleeping on a straw mattress doesn't do your spine any favours. You stand up, stretch, feel your joints pop and crack. Your mouth tastes stale, and your tunic is wrinkled from sleeping in it. But these are minor concerns. You walk to the table, and there it is, The same setup as yesterday. A piece of bread, dark and dense and probably from 2 days ago now, even harder than yesterday's bread. A bowl of olive oil, the same thick greenish liquid that smells like grass and earth. You pick up the bread and dip it in the oil. The bread takes a long time to absorb the liquid because it's so dry and hard. You take a bite, and it's exactly what you expected. Chewy, salty, heavy. The oil coats your mouth. This is breakfast. Again, like it was yesterday, like it will be tomorrow, like it has been for weeks and months and probably years. You're not sick of it exactly, because being sick of your food is a luxury that requires having options. You just accept it, the way you accept the heat and the noise and the discomfort of your mattress. You finish the bread, drink water from the clay cup, wipe your hands on your tunic. The routine is so automatic now that you barely think about it. Your mind is already moving ahead to the day, to the walk to the shop, to the customers you'll help, to the hours you'll spend standing behind a counter. You grab your sandals, the same ones with the fraying strap that still hasn't been fixed. You really should fix that. You keep thinking you should fix it, and then you never do, and at some point the strap is going to break completely and then you'll have to actually deal with it. You step out of your apartment and into the hallway. The building is waking up around you. You hear footsteps, doors opening, voices, the same sounds as yesterday morning, the same patterns repeating. You descend the stairs, and they creak in the same places they creaked yesterday. You pass the same neighbours, exchange the same nods. Everything is familiar to the point of being invisible. You don't really see these things anymore. You just move through them, your body knowing the route, your mind free to wander. The street outside is already busy. Rome doesn't have a slow, gentle start to the day. Rome wakes up all at once, everyone emerging at roughly the same time, everyone trying to get somewhere. The noise hits you immediately. That wall of sound that's made up of 1,000 different sources all blending together. Carts and voices and animals and tools and doors and shutters and footsteps and everything else that makes noise. You start walking, and it's the same route you walked yesterday, the same route you walk every day. Your feet know this path so well that you could probably walk it blindfolded. Past the bakery that's already producing that incredible smell of fresh bread, past the fountain where people are gathering to fill their water jugs, past the shops that are opening their shutters and setting up for the day. The city is a machine, and every morning it starts up again, all the gears turning, all the parts moving, everyone playing their role in keeping Rome functional. You're thinking about nothing in particular, just walking, just being. Your stomach is already starting to feel empty again even though you just ate, because bread and oil doesn't sustain you for long. You'll be hungry by mid-morning, and you'll buy something from a street vendor, and you'll be hungry again by lunch, and you'll eat again, and the cycle will continue. Hunger is just part of the rhythm, the pulse that underlies everything else. You work to earn money to buy food to give you energy to work. It's circular and endless and occasionally feels absurd, but it's also just how things are. A woman walks past you carrying a baby on her hip and holding the hand of a small child who's dragging his feet and clearly doesn't want to be going wherever they're going. The woman looks tired, the kind of tired that goes deeper than just one sleepless night. That's the tired of being responsible for small humans who need constant attention and care. You don't have children. You can't really afford children. Children require resources, space, time, money, all things you have in limited supply. Maybe someday you'll have children, or maybe you won't. It's not something you think about much. The future is abstract and uncertain. The present is concrete and demanding. You turn a corner and see a group of men standing around talking, all of them wearing togas, which means they're citizens with some level of status. They're probably discussing politics or business or philosophy, the kinds of conversations that educated Romans have when they gather in public spaces. You walk past them without slowing down. Their world and your world exist in the same city, but they rarely intersect. They eat elaborate meals and you eat bread and oil. They wear togas and you wear a simple tunic. They have slaves and you are, economically speaking, not that many steps above being a slave yourself. This doesn't make you angry or resentful. It's just the structure of Roman society. There are emperors and senators at the top, and there are slaves at the bottom, and in between there's a whole range of people at various levels of wealth and status, and you're somewhere in the middle to lower section of that range. You're free, which is better than being enslaved. You have work, which is better than being unemployed. You have food, which is better than being hungry. These things matter. These things are worth acknowledging, even if they don't make your life luxurious or easy. The pottery shop appears ahead, and you feel that familiar mix of resignation and acceptance. This is where you spend most of your waking hours. This is your workplace, your source of income, your contribution to the vast economy of Rome. You're not making art or building monuments or doing anything that will be remembered. You're just facilitating the sale of clay objects that people need for their daily lives. Plates and bowls and cups and oil lamps and amphorae. Practical things, necessary things, boring things maybe, but boring doesn't mean unimportant. You reach the door and step inside. Gaius is already there, of course, because Gaius is always there before you. He's arranging something on a shelf, moving pottery around with no apparent system or logic. He grunts a greeting without looking at you. You move to your position behind the counter, settle onto your stool, and the day officially begins. Another day of waiting and watching and helping customers and negotiating prices. Another day of standing and sitting and standing again. Another day in the endless chain of days that make up a life. The morning passes slowly. A few customers come in, browse, sometimes buy something, sometimes don't. You help a man find a specific size of bowl. You wrap a purchase for a woman who's buying an oil lamp for her mother. You watch Gaius negotiate with a customer who's particularly aggressive about getting a lower price, and you watch Gaius hold his ground, refusing to budge beyond a certain point. The customer eventually pays what Gaius wants, grumbling about it but paying nonetheless. This is the dance, the game that everyone plays, the ritual of commerce in ancient Rome. Your mind wanders while you wait for customers. You think about breakfast, about whether you'll ever eat anything else for breakfast, about whether wealthy Romans ever get tired of their elaborate morning meals. You wonder what the emperor ate this morning. You wonder if he even thinks about food or if it's just something that appears in front of him, prepared by professionals, served by slaves, taken for granted. You wonder what it would be like to never worry about money, to never count coins, to never choose between buying better food and saving for rent. These thoughts aren't productive, but they're also not particularly painful. You're not tortured by the inequality of Roman society. You're just aware of it, the way you're aware of the weather or the passage of time. Some things can't be changed by individual action, and accepting that doesn't mean you're defeated or hopeless. It just means you're realistic. You're not going to become emperor. You're not going to suddenly become wealthy. You're going to keep selling pottery and eating bread and oil and living in your small apartment, and that's fine. That's life. That's what life is for most people throughout most of history. A customer walks in, interrupting your thoughts. She's young, maybe your age, maybe younger, and she looks nervous, like this is her first time shopping alone without her mother or someone else to guide her. She glances around the shop with wide eyes, clearly overwhelmed by the options. You walk over and ask if you can help her find something. She says she needs plates, her voice quiet and uncertain. You show her where the plates are, explain the different sizes and prices, and she relaxes slightly. You're being kind to her, not because Gaius is watching, but because being kind costs you nothing, and sometimes small kindnesses make the day feel less harsh. She selects 2 plates, asks if the price is negotiable, and you tell her it is, within reason. She makes an offer that's actually quite reasonable, and you accept it without consulting Gaius because you know he'd accept it too. She pays, you wrap the plates in cloth, and she thanks you with genuine gratitude. She leaves, and you return to your stool, feeling slightly better than you did before. These small interactions, these brief moments of human connection, they matter more than you sometimes realize. They break up the monotony. They remind you that other people exist, that they have their own concerns and anxieties, that everyone's struggling with something. Mid-morning arrives, and your stomach starts making its presence known. The bread and oil from breakfast is long gone, converted into energy that's already been used up. You're hungry again, right on schedule, and you start thinking about what you'll buy for your mid-morning snack. Maybe roasted chickpeas from that vendor 2 streets over. Maybe a piece of fruit if any of the fruit vendors have something affordable. Maybe nothing, if you're trying to save money, if you're being responsible and thinking about the future instead of immediate gratification. Gaius announces he's stepping out for a while, which means you're in charge again. You watch him leave, and then you're alone with the pottery and the street noise and your thoughts. A fly buzzes near your face, and you wave it away. The sun is getting higher, the heat building. It's going to be another hot day, the kind of day where the afternoon feels endless and oppressive. But that's later. Right now, it's just late morning, and you're just hungry, and you're just sitting in a pottery shop in ancient Rome, waiting for the next customer, waiting for lunch, waiting for the day to progress through its familiar stages toward evening and dinner and sleep. You sit there for a while, letting the street sounds drift in and out of your awareness like waves pushing gently against a shore. Nothing urgent happens, nothing dramatic. A dog trots past the doorway, nose down, following a trail only it can understand. A cart rolls by, its wheels bumping over uneven stones with the comforting clatter that's been part of city life since the first person decided wheels were a good idea. Somewhere down the street, a vendor is loudly advertising figs at a price that sounds suspiciously generous, which means the figs are either overripe, half-rotten, or possibly both. You make a mental note not to trust that voice later when hunger becomes a problem you have to deal with. You tap your fingers on your knee. You shift your weight. You adjust a stack of small bowls because adjusting them makes you feel like you're doing something productive, even if they didn't need adjusting in the first place. Time moves slowly when no one is watching, and right now, your only company is a quiet shop and the faint smell of fired clay and dust. Eventually, the heat becomes harder to ignore. The kind of heat that settles on your shoulders, then your neck, then slides down your back like it's trying to drape itself around you entirely. Rome in late morning has that way of becoming a warm blanket you didn't ask for but must now wear. You glance outside and see the sunlight hitting the street in angles that tell you noon isn't far off. The shadows have shortened, thickened, become more serious. Even the flies seem to move slower, as if they too are conserving their energy. Your stomach makes another complaint, louder this time, almost offended that you haven't addressed its needs. You pretend not to hear it, because acknowledging hunger only makes it stronger. Still, you can't help imagining food. Simple things. A handful of nuts, a small piece of cheese, anything salty, anything fresh, anything that's not the same bread and oil combination you've had every day this week. Somewhere out in the city, wealthy Romans are eating something far more indulgent, maybe honey-drenched pastries or spiced eggs or cold fruit kept in snow pits. Meanwhile, your mid-morning snack, if you can afford one, will likely be closer to the food equivalent of a shrug. A quiet movement at the doorway pulls you from your drifting thoughts. Another customer, an older man this time, with a face that looks like it has stood in the sun for decades and shoulders that have carried more weight than pottery ever will. He's calm, slow in his steps, giving the impression of someone who doesn't like being rushed and refuses to allow the world to hurry him along. He browses silently, touching nothing, just observing the shelves with a patient eye. You greet him, your voice gentle, not wanting to disturb whatever inner peace he seems to be protecting. He nods and asks if you have any simple cups, nothing decorative, nothing fancy, just plain and sturdy. You guide him to a shelf in the corner where Gaius keeps the most durable items, the ones meant for people who care more about practicality than aesthetics. He chooses two, no negotiation, no small talk. He pays exactly what you ask, places the cups carefully into a cloth bag he carries, and gives you a polite farewell before stepping back out into the sunlit street. Some customers take energy from you, some give a little bit back. This one leaves a quiet calm trailing behind him, and you're grateful for it. When he's gone, you find yourself thinking again, this time not about food, but about how many different lives pass through a shop like this. How many people pick up pottery every day, take it home, use it, break it, replace it. How many small, unremarkable transactions make up a city, a civilization, a world. It's strange in a way that history remembers emperors and battles, and not the people buying cups and plates on hot mornings. The thought soothes you for reasons you don't fully understand. Maybe because it's easier to accept your life when you imagine it stitched into the quiet fabric of millions of other unrecorded lives. Maybe because you know that years from now, no one will ask what you ate for breakfast, but the memory of bread and oil still belongs entirely to you. You sigh, resting your elbows on your knees. You're still hungry. The day is still warm. The city is still loud in its distant, sprawling way, and you are still here, waiting for something. A customer, a breeze, a reason to stand up. You don't know what will come first, but something always does. It turns out the next thing to arrive is not a breeze or a customer, but Gaius, returning sooner than expected, carrying a small cloth bundle that immediately catches your eye. You straighten up a little. Cloth bundles usually mean food, and food means relief from the emptiness twisting gently in your stomach. He tosses it toward you with the casual confidence of someone who knows his aim is good. It lands beside you with a soft, promising thud. For you, he says, in that tone that makes generosity sound like a business transaction he's already factored into his profits. Before you can thank him, he adds, "Don't get used to it," which is his way of saying he noticed you didn't take a break yet. You open the bundle and find a small portion of roasted barley cakes, still warm. A luxury by your standards. Not a feast, not even close, but far better than the dry loaf you might have bought later. You take a careful bite, the texture both dense and unexpectedly comforting. The taste is simple, grain, a hint of salt, maybe a whisper of herbs if your imagination is generous. But to your hunger, it might as well be a delicacy. You look pale, Gaius says, which is either a genuine expression of concern or a subtle way of saying you were being useless in your weakened state. With Gaius it's always hard to tell. You nod anyway, swallowing another bite, letting the warmth spread through your chest. Eating something while the shop is quiet makes the moment feel almost peaceful. Gaius steps behind the counter and begins organizing things you organized already, undoing your order and replacing it with his own. You watch him for a moment, amused by how predictable his rituals are. He mutters to himself about customers who can't make decisions, about prices rising, about the heat, about anything and everything. You let him ramble. It's part of the rhythm of the shop. It fills the silence without disturbing the calm. Once you've finished eating, you carefully fold the cloth and set it aside. Your hunger, once a nagging presence, has finally quieted. You feel more grounded, like someone has tightened a loose thread inside you. And with that grounding comes a soft wave of drowsiness, the kind that arrives after food, after heat, after too many morning hours spent waiting for something to happen. Gaius notices. Don't fall asleep, he warns, though there's no real threat in his voice. You assure him you won't, even though you're not entirely sure you can keep that promise. The shop is warm, the street noise is steady and hypnotic. Your body is beginning to suggest that perhaps consciousness is optional. To keep yourself awake, you stand and stretch, your joints giving small, satisfying clicks. You walk to the doorway and lean against the wooden frame, letting the sun hit your face. The warmth is strong but comforting, like stepping into a bath that's just a little too hot but still pleasant. You breathe in the air, heavy with dust, with spices from distant food stalls, with the faint smell of animals and city sweat. Rome has a scent that changes throughout the day, and late morning smells like life that hasn't yet surrendered to the afternoon. A group of children runs past, chasing something you can't see. One of them glances into the shop, his eyes darting over the pottery with mischievous interest, but he keeps running. You're relieved. Kids in a pottery shop are like goats in a wine cellar, unpredictable, slippery, and very good at creating problems. Back inside, Gaius is humming quietly, off-key but content. The sound blends with the distant chatter outside. You return to your stool, feeling a little more awake, a little more alive, a little more ready for the rest of the day. For a moment you find yourself thinking about breakfast again. Not the breakfast you ate, but the idea of breakfast itself. How every Roman, from the richest to the poorest, starts their day with some version of the same ritual: hunger, food, routine. Maybe that's the one equalizing force in this sprawling, uneven world. The simple need to eat, to fill the emptiness before moving on with the day. You let the thoughts settle as the city breathes around you, steady and familiar. Noon is approaching. More customers will come soon. And you will greet them, and help them, and watch the day unfold exactly as every day does. Slow, warm, ordinary, and quietly human. You feel the subtle shift in the day before you see it. The way the air thickens just slightly. The way the shadows tighten under the awnings. The way people on the street start walking with a bit more purpose, as if everyone collectively realizes noon is drifting closer. The morning has stretched itself as far as it can, and now the city is ready to fold into midday. You hear footsteps outside, unhurried but firm, and a man steps into the shop. He is tall, with the kind of posture that suggests he once served in the military or still imagines he does. His tunic is clean, not new but well cared for, and he scans the shelves with the critical eye of someone who distrusts both decoration and excuses. You greet him politely, expecting a simple purchase, perhaps a cup or a bowl. Instead, he asks for a large amphora, something sturdy enough to hold oil, wine, or possibly secrets. You guide him to the back, where the larger vessels sit lined against the wall like silent guards. The man lifts one, tests its weight, knocks gently on the side to hear the tone of the clay. You watch him evaluate it the way a father might evaluate a potential son-in-law. Suspicious, methodical, not easily impressed. "It will do," he says at last, which is high praise from this type of man. He tries to negotiate, of course. They always do. But his attempt is half-hearted, more ceremonial than serious, and you settle on a price quickly. He hands over the coins, lifts the amphora onto his shoulder with practiced ease, and nods once before leaving. The whole interaction lasts less than 5 minutes, but it feels like a small story, one of those tiny Roman comedies where both characters part feeling politely victorious. Gaius grunts approvingly from behind the counter. "Good sale," he says. Coming from him, this is equivalent to a standing ovation. You sit again, letting your shoulders relax. The lull returns, gentle as a tide. You can feel your mind wandering the way it always does when nothing demands your attention. You think about how many hands have touched the pottery in this shop, how many households these objects will live in, how many breakfasts, lunches, dinners they'll witness, how many mornings they'll be used to scoop olives or hold porridge or carry yesterday's leftovers into tomorrow's meals. You imagine someone, maybe someone like you, waking up tomorrow, reaching for one of these bowls, asking themselves the same question Romans ask every single morning. What can I afford to eat today? The thought isn't sad, it's simply real, a universal rhythm that ties you to everyone else across the city, across time, across all the quiet kitchens where simple meals begin and end. A breeze rolls through the doorway, warm but still refreshing enough to be welcomed. It carries the faint scent of bread from a nearby bakery. Your stomach, always eager for breadcrumbs of hope, responds with a soft reminder that it exists. You place a hand over it as if comforting a restless animal. The street grows busier, voices rise and fall like soft waves, merchants calling out prices, children laughing, someone somewhere trying desperately to haggle and failing. Rome is awake, fully awake, and the sound of it presses lightly against the walls of the shop. You find yourself watching the sunlight shift across the floor, sliding from the threshold to the shelves, highlighting one vase and then another. It's slow, almost imperceptible, but steady, a reminder that time moves whether you notice or not. Another customer appears at the doorway, this one a woman with a stern expression and an air of someone who has a list of errands, and exactly zero patience for inefficiency. She announces she needs a mixing bowl. You provide one. She inspects it as though it might explode. She declares it acceptable. She pays without haggling, which feels like a minor miracle. Then she's gone, leaving behind the faint scent of mint and frustration. You glance at Gaius, who shrugs. Some people fight over every coin, he says. Some people don't. The simplicity of the observation makes you smile. And then once again the city settles. Customers come and go like gentle waves, each bringing a little story, each leaving with something made from earth and fire. And all the while, the slow, inevitable approach of noon wraps itself around you. You exhale, letting the moment stretch. You're not in a hurry. Rome is never in a hurry, no matter how loud it gets. The next lull is quieter than the last, a soft, steady pause that seems to settle over the shop like a thin layer of dust. You lean back on your stool again, letting the wooden seat mold itself to your spine. Your muscles loosen. Your breathing evens out. And for a moment, you hover in that dreamy space between wakefulness and the kind of half-nap people take without meaning to. The shop feels dimmer now, not because the sun has faded, but because you've grown accustomed to its brightness. Your eyes want rest, even if duty requires alertness. You blink slowly, and each blink lasts just a fraction longer than the last. You can feel the warmth from the street pressing into the shop, mixing with the earthy smell of clay, forming a scent that's almost comforting, almost like home. A scraping sound brings you back, but gently. Not a customer, just Gaius shifting a heavy pot from one shelf to another. You watch him for a moment, the way he handles each piece with a familiarity that's almost tender. This shop isn't just his livelihood. It's his world, his identity, his little empire of objects that break as easily as people. He catches you watching and frowns half-heartedly. "Don't fall asleep," he repeats, as though reminding himself as well. You lift your arms and stretch, feeling the stiffness in your shoulders. "I'm awake," you say, though awake may be a generous term. Outside, the voices soften for a moment. Not silence, but something close to it. A temporary dip in the rhythm of the street, and in that dip you become aware of your own heartbeat, slow, steady, a quiet drum marking the passage of time. Your thoughts drift again, unhurried. You think of breakfast, not today's breakfast, but all breakfasts. How Romans start with what they have, leftovers, bread, olives, cheese if they're lucky, honey if they're blessed. How breakfast is never glamorous, never meant for guests, never something to impress anyone with. It's a private ritual, a practical one, something that belongs only to the eater. You imagine wealthy Romans, with their spread of figs and imported honey, their warm wheat cakes, their servants carrying polished trays. You imagine the opposite too, the poor labourer eating yesterday's crust before the sun rises, washing it down with whatever drink he can afford. Two lives separated by everything yet joined by the simplest human need. Food is like that. It levels and divides, feeds and defines. Your stomach, apparently inspired by philosophical reflection, voices another quiet complaint. You ignore it for now. Lunch will come eventually. A pair of tourists, not real tourists of course, but the Roman equivalent, wander into the shop next. They speak Latin with an accent that suggests they're from the countryside, maybe visiting relatives in the city. They marvel at everything, whispering excitedly, pointing at pieces you consider completely ordinary. Their wonder is oddly refreshing. It makes you remember that the city you take for granted is someone else's spectacle. They buy 2 small cups as souvenirs, their faces glowing with satisfaction, as if purchasing pottery is a cultural achievement. You wrap the cups with extra cloth, more than necessary, because their enthusiasm is contagious, and because kindness, when you can afford it, is never wasted. When they leave, the shop becomes quiet again. Not lonely, just peaceful. You settle back onto your stool, listening to the hum of the city swaying beneath the heat. You let your gaze drift to the doorway, where a slice of bright light frames the street like a painting. Noon is close. You can feel it in the thickening air, in the slower footsteps outside, in the way the city seems to gather itself before the long, warm afternoon. You take a slow breath, letting it fill your lungs. The day isn't exciting, it isn't extraordinary, but it's yours. Every bowl, every thought, every quiet hour of it. And in ancient Rome, sometimes that is enough. You notice the moment noon finally arrives, not by a dramatic shift in the world, but by the smallest signs, the way the light outside becomes a little flatter, a little heavier. Like the sun has decided to sit directly overhead and stare down at Rome without blinking. The street noise is slow, not disappearing but stretching into longer, lazier shapes. Merchants soften their voices. Even the stray dogs wander into patches of shade, as if obeying some unspoken midday rule. Inside the shop, the heat settles on your shoulders like a warm shawl you didn't ask for but now have no choice but to wear. Your body grows sluggish, the kind of slow that isn't quite fatigue, but more like being melted gently around the edges. You glance at Gaius, who's wiping his forehead with a cloth and pretending he isn't sweating, even though he clearly is. Pride is apparently more important than body temperature. A customer enters, a young man, maybe your age, maybe a bit younger, with curls too perfect to be accidental. He looks around with the expression of someone who is here because someone else told him to be. After a moment he explains that he needs a gift for his sister's wedding. Something nice, but not too nice, because of course there are other siblings, and fairness must be maintained. He says this with the weary tone of someone who has been given instructions so detailed they no longer make sense. You show him a few options. Decorative bowls, painted jugs, a lamp with a subtle floral pattern. He hesitates over each one like he's afraid selecting the wrong item will ruin the family forever. Eventually, he chooses a medium-sized bowl with a pale wave design along the rim, elegant but not luxurious. The perfect embodiment of nice, but not too nice. He pays after attempting one half-hearted haggle, then thanks you as if you personally saved him from disaster. When he leaves, you and Gaius exchange a look. The silent kind that says, yes, that man will always follow instructions, even if they lead him in circles. The brief rush of interaction fades, and the shop returns to its heavy stillness. You stand again, slow and deliberate, stretching your arms above your head until your spine gives a few satisfying cracks. The heat makes the movement feel like stretching through honey, thick and warm. You step outside for a moment, letting the sunlight hit your face. Even though it's hot, the brightness sharpens your senses, waking you from the drowsy lull creeping through your body. The street is alive but subdued, like a giant animal that hasn't decided whether to nap or wander. A food vendor walks past carrying a tray of something that smells roasted and expensive. The scent floats toward you, rich and sweet, and for a moment you're tempted to follow him. But you already know you can't afford whatever he's selling, and even if you could, Gaius would probably appear behind you like a disappointed apparition. You return inside, letting the relative dimness welcome you back. Gaius is reorganizing the same shelf he reorganizes every afternoon. You suspect it never needs reorganizing, he simply likes the ritual. Something about controlling the shape of the day when the world outside refuses to be controlled. You'll scare customers away if you look half asleep, he mutters without looking at you. I'm awake, you say, though the heat is doing its best to prove you wrong. He grunts, which is his way of ending a conversation whether it has begun or not. More silence follows, not empty silence, just slow, full, warm silence. The kind that fills the space between breaths and steps and thoughts. You let yourself sink into it, letting the day hold you the way the sun holds the city. You think again about breakfast, how simple it was, how predictable, how completely unremarkable. And yet here you are, hours later, still thinking about food, still thinking about how every morning begins with hunger, and every day becomes a journey of satisfying it just enough to keep moving forward. Maybe that's what makes breakfast fascinating in its own subtle way. Not the food itself, but the idea that it starts everything. The first bite that wakes your body. The first taste that reminds you that you're alive. The first small moment of the day that belongs entirely to you, even if it's just bread, oil and hope. You close your eyes for a brief moment, just a moment, and let the thought linger there, warm and quiet. Noon drifts forward, the day exhales, and you remain in your little shop, balanced between wakefulness and the soft pull of sleep, waiting for whatever comes next. The next stretch of time passes in a way that feels almost fluid. Not fast, not slow, just drifting. You find yourself counting small details again, the faint cracks in a jug that was fired too quickly. The slightly uneven line painted on a vase that Gaius definitely told the artist to fix but clearly didn't. The imperfections make everything feel more human, more alive, more ordinary in a comforting way. A distant shout rings through the street, though it's not alarming, probably someone complaining about being overcharged for figs, which is a daily Roman tradition. You hear the sound fade into the background hum of the city, blending with the clatter of wheels. The occasional cluck of a chicken on the run, and the rhythmic tapping of someone repairing sandals nearby. The afternoon heat deepens. The air inside the shop becomes thicker, like warm clay being shaped around you. You shift on your stool again, trying to find a position that feels less like slowly sinking into a soft, uncomfortable mattress. It doesn't help much. This is the hour Rome becomes heavy. Even the flies seem slower, lazily circling as if debating whether it's worth the effort. Gaius walks to the doorway, peering out. "Quiet day," he says. You nod, that's all there is to say. Quiet days are common. They don't surprise you. They barely register. But they carry a certain softness that loud days don't, a kind of airy patience. Gaius disappears into the back room, probably to sort something that doesn't need sorting, or to complain to the storage jars about the price of firewood. You're not entirely sure. You're left alone again, the stillness settling on your shoulders like a second tunic. Your thoughts drift, unspooling slowly. You wonder what people will remember about Rome centuries from now. The emperors, the marble, the aqueducts. Probably not the breakfasts. Probably not the pottery shop workers who spent mornings and afternoons surrounded by clay and heat and the gentle rhythm of customers who needed cups. But you have a strange comfort in that thought. A warmth in the idea that life doesn't need to be remembered to matter. That a quiet day in a small shop is still a day lived fully, whether or not anyone writes it down. You let yourself imagine a wealthy Roman breakfast again. Figs, sliced neatly, honey drizzling like sunlight on a plate, dates arranged with deliberate care, maybe even chilled wine. It feels almost unreal compared to your quiet meal of bread and oil. Yet somehow, thinking about it doesn't make you feel envy, just curiosity. What does honey taste like when it has nothing to do with hunger? What does luxury mean when it's normal? A shadow crosses the doorway, and a woman steps in carrying a small basket. She greets you with a warm smile, one of those rare, genuinely pleasant customer entrances that feels like a breeze in human form. She explains she needs a jug for carrying water, something not too heavy, not too large. You guide her to a shelf and she chooses quickly, decisive, efficient, grateful. She pays fairly, thanks you sincerely, and leaves with the jug tucked carefully in her basket. Her presence lingers even after she's gone, not physically, but emotionally. Some people carry a little light with them. Some people make your afternoon feel slightly less like a melting wax tablet. You sit again, feeling your body soften, feeling the day settle into you. In the distance, a bell rings, marking the slow drift toward the late afternoon. A reminder that time, even on days like this, has a structure, that the world keeps moving. You inhale deeply, letting the warm air fill your lungs. You exhale slowly, letting your thoughts settle. Everything feels steady, predictable, peacefully ordinary. The kind of ordinary that makes you want to close your eyes for just a moment. Just a moment. As our quiet Roman morning drifts toward its end, picture the city settling into its gentle daytime hum. The early breakfast hours have passed, and the streets have begun to warm beneath the soft glow of the sun. But before we leave this slow ancient morning behind, imagine yourself lingering just a little longer, standing in the doorway of a simple domus, where the scent of warm bread still clings softly to the air. Inside, the hearth crackles faintly. A small clay platter still holds the last crumbs of rustic barley bread, and the remnants of honey cling to the spoon like golden threads. A jug of watered wine sits nearby, its surface catching the light, reflecting the quietness of an unhurried morning routine. It's easy to imagine someone, maybe a tired father, a young apprentice, or an elderly grandmother, taking one last sip before stepping out to face the long Roman day. Outside, vendors shout in the distance, but even their voices seem slower, softened by the haze of early light. A baker sweeps the front of his shop, sending little clouds of flour drifting gently into the air like morning dust. A woman carries a basket of fresh figs, their skins glistening softly. Somewhere, a child laughs, chasing pigeons across a courtyard shaded by olive trees. It is a world both familiar and far away. A world where breakfast was simple, but comforting. A world where the day began not with rush, but with ritual. You stand there quietly, feeling the warmth of the moment, knowing this peaceful Roman morning, like all mornings, will fade into the hum of daily life. But for now, you're still here, still lingering in the soft glow of an ancient sunrise. And now, let all of Rome slowly drift away. Let the noisy vendors, the clatter of sandals, the scent of warm bread and figs all fade into a gentle, comforting hush. Nothing from that world needs your attention anymore. The ancient streets, the voices, the hearth smoke rising in thin ribbons, they can all settle behind you like a story closing softly on its final page. Take a slow breath in and let it ease out. Feel your shoulders loosen, as though you've set down a heavy amphora you were never meant to carry. Feel the quiet of the Roman morning settle around you like a warm cloak, soft, steady, unhurried. Imagine the cobblestones beneath your feet smoothing out into something softer, like cool sand. Imagine the sunlight dimming into a gentle, drowsy glow. Even the rustle of olive trees grows slower, their leaves whispering a lullaby older than empires. Your mind is allowed to drift. Your thoughts can wander like a slow river winding through the countryside just outside the city walls. Nothing is urgent here, nothing is loud. Everything asks you to rest. The simple Roman breakfast, bread, honey, figs, warm wine, has settled warmly into memory, like a small comforting weight in your hands. You don't need to hold on to it, you can let it go, let it dissolve into stillness. Another slow breath in, and a long gentle breath out. Feel yourself growing heavier, quieter, softer. The kind of calm that ancient people must have felt after rising with the sun, finishing their meal, and sitting for a moment in the early silence before the day began. You are safe, you are still, and the morning, ancient or modern, no longer needs you. You can rest now, you can drift, you can sleep. Whenever you're ready, let the world grow quiet and close your eyes.